Right, so hopefully there you can see my screen. So yeah, I'm a postdoc in the Inclusive Design Group at the Engineering Design Centre, which is part of the University of Cambridge. I've spent about the last 20 years of my life trying to work out how you can tell if text is easy to read at a glance or not. About 6 months ago, I finally got to a point where I felt like I'd solved it. So it's been a huge journey for me on that. Kind of think it can't be done, it can't be done, it can't be done. Oh wait, actually I've done it. I then had the pleasure of writing the guidance for the European Accessibility Act, which has come into force and affects a whole range of sectors like e-commerce services, travel services, banking services, all these sorts of things. And the European Accessibility Act said information shall have adequate size and sufficient contrast, full stop. To which everyone in Europe basically then went, well, what the hell is adequate size and sufficient contrast then? There's a particular standard called EN 301549. I'm that geeky, I know that number off by heart. But that was the standard that defined adequate size and sufficient contrast in technical terms. And I had the pleasure of writing the section on adequate size in EN 301549, which is currently going through the ratification process. There's another standard called EN 18339, which is the standard for the European Accessibility Act that's everything that's non-digital. So everything printed, everything that has physical labels on it will be covered by 18339. And I also had the pleasure of writing the adequate size, sufficient contrast, appropriate style, and appropriate font weight, and all sorts of other line spacing and paragraph spacing that's covered within this. So these two standards are making their way through the European standards approval process. They're very, very close to be getting approved. Once they are, I think they will be the best guidance in the world for how to determine adequate size and sufficient contrast. Of course, I would say that because I wrote them, but I'm also right. So with that obviously modest introduction, let me crack on. So I'm going to talk today about visual aspects of digital health exclusion. And I'm going to do this as a series of inconvenient truths. And I'm pitching this presentation as though I'm talking to a bunch of people who would be developing medical devices or apps for medical devices. Obviously, some of you on the call may or may not be doing that at the moment. Some of you may or may not do it in the future. Or some of you may or may not wonder what's the message that I need to tell when I next interface with somebody who's doing some kind of mobile app or website design. What are the important things that they need to know? So I've kind of pitched the presentation on that basis. So the first truth is that your phone is probably bigger than your users. This is a size comparison chart of the iPhone over the years. It's quite interesting that the iPhone 6 Plus was a plus size phone back in the day, about 20 years ago, and this was the size of the iPhone 6. Fast forward 20 years or so, and the iPhone 11 is now similar in size to what the iPhone X was, the 12 and the 11. And in fact, what used to be the 6 has become the mini. So basically everything's got bigger, and what used to be the plus size is now the normal size, and what used to be the normal size is now the mini size. But the important being one, if we're going to test something on an app or a website to see if it works, which phone should we pick? And I heartily recommend picking the iPhone SE second edition onwards, from 2020 onwards. It's now in its fourth edition. I pulled this article today. It was from 2025, I think, 2026. There you go, February 2025. We're talking about the launch of the iPhone SE. Suggesting it's going to be the most popular iPhone SE ever, and it's hoping to shift 20 million iPhone units. So it's not necessarily the most popular phone, but it is certainly a very popular phone that is very small. So if you want a reasonable worst case scenario that people are likely to experience when interfacing with a health care app on their phone, you really want to make sure anything iPhone SE or bigger is pretty much the choice. If you've got a phone in your pocket, if you measure the width of it, if it's more than 60 millimeters, then your phone is bigger than this representative phone. If the lit area of your screen is about 60 millimeters, then your phone is indeed suitable for just doing quick checks of stuff to see if it's going to work. The next inconvenient truth is that your eyesight is probably better than your users. So the big question being, if something works for you, does that mean it'll work for the kind of people who want to interact with your healthcare app? So in order to check this out, I'm going to look at some survey data that came from a German survey that took place in 2020 with 1,010 participants, randomly recruited by postcode sampling in private households. This was a survey that I had the pleasure of designing. You can see the handheld test chart being viewed by me here. And these are the letters that are on the test chart, and these are the letter heights of the letters in the smallest row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the visionability of the people who are on this call right now with the visionability of the people in this survey based on these letter charts. Obviously, you're all remote, so I can't give you a letter chart by posting it through my laptop. But what I can do is give you a mobile phone interactive exercise that gives you roughly the same sort of answer as that test chart would. So if you can all please get your mobile phones out and go to this website, it's cedc.tools/E, or scan the QR code that's on the screen and it should take you straight there. When you do go there, you should see something that looks roughly like this screenshot shown here with a credit card on the screen. You need to take a credit card out of your pocket, place the credit card on top of the screen that you see, and then use these plus and minus buttons that are here on the screen to make sure that the credit card on screen is exactly the same size as the credit card in your hand, or near there or thereabouts. So I'll just pause for 30 seconds or so to give everyone a chance to do that. And once you have done the calibration, the letter E will then be shown at different sizes and pointing in different directions. Please tap the arrow on the screen that corresponds with the direction that the E is pointing in. So the first one is pointing to the right, and then it might be random after that, up, down, left, or right. I think I might end the show at that point so I can see the chat. So if you run it through and you go to the point when you finish, it will tell you something about your visionability. One of them will be a 3-digit number that represents the approximate dots per inch that your eye can resolve. So when you've got to that point, please type a star and then that 3-digit number into the chat window.
What do you have to do, Sam, if we can't read it anymore?
Just keep guessing. If you're not sure, just keep guessing. It will terminate when you get the guesses wrong. You can hold the phone at any distance that works for you. Just keep going, keep guessing. Eventually, it will terminate and give you a 3-digit number. That's
and we give you the number in the chat.
Yeah, and then please type star and then the number in the chat. You have to type the star, or I won't be able to automatically harvest it. Perfect. Couple coming in. Ooh, all around the 200-ish. DPI, very good. We'll just give it a little bit of a while for this to come through. With the arrows, you tap the arrow that's pointing in the same direction as the E is pointing in. So the first one is pointing to the right, like the prongs of the E are pointing to the right. So tap the arrow that corresponds with that. Just keep going until it tells you to stop. Keep guessing if you're not sure. And Elena, you need to type the star in front of the thing, please. Otherwise, my automatic thing won't recognize it. So please type your ones in again, but type star and then the number. Perfect. That's it. And Elena, if you can do your one as well, please, with a star in front of it. Isn't that probably just about everyone? Maybe I'll do Elena's one again then with the star, so that we get approximately the right. Right, now I'm going to try some magic, which may or may not work. Please bear with me if it does. Clap loud applause. Bear with me if it doesn't. Clap loud applause if it does. But I'm going to try and harvest all of that by pasting it into there, which comes complete with an image, which is a bit of a surprise. And then hopefully I'm going to hit my magic button in Excel and then transfer across to the chart. And to thundering applause, what you now see is the distribution of the visionability of the people who are on this call compared to the distribution of visionability of the people who were in the UK survey. So what we can see is that the absolute worst vision ability of someone on this call, which was 140 dots per inch, is by no means the sort of worst set of vision ability that you would expect to see of people in the country. And this line here, this blue line, is the threshold of the chart that I could design in 2010, which is using print technology at about 300 dpi. Mobile phones now allow you to go further. So these two lines here at sort of 280, 375, 565 are at levels of visionability that are so good they're kind of off the bottom line of the chart that was given out in the survey. But I've done this exercise countless times in countless environments. I've never yet had an environment where the distribution of vision of the people that I'm talking to is worse than the distribution of the people in the country. Every single time it's better. And more often than not, it's about 1 or 2 rows better. And I keep thinking to myself, why is this the case? And it's most likely because every time I talk to people, I'm talking to the kind of people that use their eyesight for their work on a daily basis. They're the kind of people that wear glasses if they need them, go to the opticians if they're having issues with their vision, and take steps in their life to make sure that their vision is as best as it possibly could be. When you knock on people's doors, you get a very different perspective. People who just ought to wear glasses but can't be bothered to or don't want to. People who haven't quite got round to going to the opticians yet because their glasses kind of work, but it's just not that brilliant. And my absolute all-time favorite story, which I heard from an interviewer, one of the people who conducted this survey, and they told me they knocked on this guy's door, they gave him the reading chart, and he said, hold on a second, let me get my reading glasses. But he actually picked up his wife's reading glasses because he didn't have his available. And when he put his wife's reading glasses on, which he had chosen specifically for the purpose of doing this task, his vision was worse with those reading glasses than it was without them. Now, in an indoor office environment, that story is never going to happen. That story does not represent any of the people on this call. It has never represented any of the people that I've ever done this exercise with. And I think that's why the vision ability is so much different in these professional office environments. What this means is when you design an app or a website or a thing and you look at it yourself and go, I can see it, I think it's fine. And then you look at your next door neighbor who sits next to you and they can see it and they think it's fine. And everybody in the office agrees that they can see it and they think it's fine. You are all woefully wrong in your extent to which your evaluation is actually representing the vision of ability of the people who are going to use that app or service. And if the people, your intended user population is much older, then things get dramatically more skewed in that regard. So I'm now going to hopefully seamlessly switch back to PowerPoint. That was that bit, that was that bit. And I'm now going to look at aging. One of the primary drivers of variation in eyesight ability is aging. And there's 3 things that happen as your eye ages. The first is that these cells in the back of the eye become less sensitive. The second is that this lens at the front of the eye becomes cloudy. This one's called cataracts. And here's the slam dunk, the one that absolutely swamps all the other effects, is these muscles that stretch the lens to change the focus of distance between near things and far things get weaker. So this is a graph that shows you the variation of the age in the UK. This is the 16 plus population. This was done in about 2010. And at that time, if we look at the adult population, about half the adult population are below the age of 45 and about half the adult population above the age of 45. And I am 46 years old, so I am literally standing right in the middle between the first half and the second half of the people in the country. So that population graph is just about up here now. It's the same one, but underneath it, I'm showing a plot of the ocular accommodation. This is the ability of the eye to change its focus from near and far. Big numbers mean that you have more ability to change the focus between near and far. What you see with this is that those muscles that stretch the lens becomes stiffer and the muscles get weaker. And the combined effect of this is continuous over your entire life. When I tested this sort of thing with my 8-year-old, they can practically see things at about 10 centimeters or even 5 centimeters away. As you get older, that near point gets further and further and further away from your face. it becomes noticeable at about this point. This is where it starts to impact on your ability to read stuff in the real world. And that's the point when you suddenly go, oh, I think I might be getting age-related long-sightedness. But it's an effect that's been happening over your whole life. It just becomes noticeable at this particular time. What you find is that this is a ski slope if downhill in this particular area around age 45. I am literally standing on this ski slope, heading down it 1 month at a time. But before getting too depressed about the whole thing, I'm going to flip to a few other slides to say that it's not all bad news. So yes, the ability to change focus from near and far drops off a cliff as you get older, and it stays falling off the cliff as you get older than that. But if I look at household disposable income, actually the picture looks quite rosy, with a peak of household income typically occurring about age 55. This one's my favorite graph of all time. We call it the grumpy curve. This is from the self-reported overall satisfaction with life on a 7-point scale from a survey called Understanding Society in 2011. And it tells a wonderful story, which is that as you leave school and leave university, you're all bright-faced and rosy-eyed. And then you find that you get older, you get a job, you get married, you get kids, you get a house, and you end up at this point here at about age 45. I am at my position of maximum grumpiness, and I'm very happy to acknowledge that. But the good news is I've got all of this to look forward to as my kids bugger off, and I find I've got more disposable income than I ever have before. Now, obviously, at the very end here, capability loss will reduce the quality of life in the end. There's no doubt about that. But there is a very strong sustained period of happiness, even though at this point, every ability graph that you could draw is falling off of a cliff. So the ability is declining, but that doesn't mean satisfaction with life is declining because of adaptations and various other things that people make. So if I look now at the impact of age-related long-sightedness, this graph is showing the closest point that you can focus on as a plot compared to your age. As I mentioned before, very, very young people can focus at about 10 centimeters. This distance gets further and further away from you. At the point when it intersects your range of normal reading distances, when about 30 to 40 centimeters, this is the point when you start to notice. I'm age 45. As I said, I'm on the downhill ski slope, or in this case, the uphill thing of my near point accelerating away from me. And I'm actually noticing this now almost on a month-by-month basis. It used to be a year-by-year basis that I would get my glasses changed. I now have bifocals because I couldn't keep this normal reading distance without the bifocals. I got my bifocals done in January or February, I think it was this year. And already now I think they need to be changed to become stronger to try and keep pace with my downhill ski slope. When I'm age 50, without any varifocals or bifocals, I would be here. With varifocals and bifocals, I can pull it back in. But there is it's never quite as good as if you didn't need those things. You do an awful lot of this sort of thing when you've got varifocals or bifocals, and your ability to scan large interfaces to try and find things gets completely destroyed. So there are options, but it's never as good as having young eyes that can just see stuff at 10 centimeters. Here's the same plot from the survey data that I was talking about earlier that I plotted your results against. Actually, sorry, it's the same test card, but it's a different survey. This one's the Towards Better Design survey, and it's threshold, and it's where people are wearing any glasses they normally wear for the majority of the day. Each dot on this graph is a cluster of people at a particular age who've got a particular vision ability. This is the test chart letter size up here. So very large letters means very poor vision ability, and very small letters means excellent vision ability. And this graph shows you two things. One is that on average, people who are under the age of 45 have better vision than people who are aged over 45. But it also shows you that the scatter of vision ability, the diverse range of vision abilities that you would expect to see, dramatically increases as you get older. I think the primary reason for this is everybody's vision is on near vision, then their ability to change between near and far. Every single person on this plot is going down that downhill ski slope. But these people here along the bottom have got bifocals or varifocals and are still maintaining to be able to see reasonably small text, despite their vision, their ocular accommodation falling off a cliff. These people up here really ought to go and see their opticians, and they almost certainly could do better. But their everyday majority setup of visual aids is showing a very, very poor level of near vision ability. Now, the World Health Organization has a particular definition of near vision ability. In the numbers that I gave you for the test we just did, it means that you can't read details at 115 dpi or smaller. So even with me, with the struggles that I'm having with my bifocal glasses and the ability to read ingredients lists and so on, I'm still well in as being not visually impaired from a near vision perspective. What's incredibly shocking is quite how many people have a degree of vision ability that is equivalent to a disability of near vision impairment as far as the WHO classification goes. On an entire adults basis, it's 21% of all UK adults. But if you're designing a health app or something for older people, 38% of adults age 45 plus have a degree of near vision impairment. And most importantly, none of them are sitting next to you when you're in your office or in your research group or within the kind of people that you tend to engage with. So I'm going to come back at the end of this presentation to how you can design stuff and evaluate stuff so that it is fit for purpose. But for now, I'm going to change gears and move on to inconvenient truth number 3, which is that lowercase is better. Now, if you take some text and you take a particular font like Arial and you write a word in lowercase like hello, and then you change it from lowercase to uppercase, then the word gets easier to see. But that has cheated. The word has got a great deal bigger, as well as moving between uppercase and lowercase. So although everyone tends to think, oh, we'll make it uppercase so we can make it easier to see, what's actually happened is that you made it a great deal bigger. And in fact, if you resized the lowercase text so that it took up as much real estate as the uppercase text does, then you would find that the lowercase text wins, which is slightly unusual. And nobody really thinks that that's true, which is why I put it in as an inconvenient truth. How do I know this is really true? Well, it's not just my opinion. I ran experiments where I tested the glance readability of common 3- and 4-letter words like these at 15 different sizes, at 4 different contrast levels, at 5 different font weights, and separately for lowercase words, uppercase words, and 3- and 4-digit random numbers. That's a total of 900 different test conditions, and each test condition was repeated 5 times per person that took part in my experiments. Here's roughly what the experimental data looks like. This is 3 sets of 3-dimensional glance readability surfaces, which show how the minimum character height that you need varies as a result of the font weight and of the contrast. So what it's showing is that down here, it's showing that high contrast, bold text means it needs a reasonably small character size. If I push to lower contrast, lighter weight fonts, the text needs to be a great deal bigger. And this shows the same set of data for uppercase versus lowercase. But to explain this visually for you, what I've done here is size the text on this slide so that these letters or words that would be made out of these letters would be equally glance readable as each other. And what we find is that for most of the letters in the alphabet, it doesn't make much difference whether they're uppercase or lowercase. If you look at an uppercase S and a lowercase s, if you scale one to the other, you get the same thing. That's for these particular letters in the alphabet, but there are 4 letters where the difference is absolutely dramatic. If I look at the size of an F in an uppercase compared to an F in a lowercase, when these are equally readable at a glance, the F is taking up a lot less space. The L is taking up a vast amount less space, as is the J, and the T is not quite so dramatic, but it is there. What this means is if I take words that are full of I's, L's, F's, and T's, I find an absolutely dramatic reduction in the amount of real estate that's needed to depict that word in uppercase compared to lowercase when they're equally readable at a glance. But to really hammer this home, I've got an interactive exercise for you. Now, this is going over Zoom, which means that there's screen sharing involved, which means that the refresh rate might be a bit different. So this exercise may or may not work. It may be very jerky for you. It works perfectly and it's super smooth for me. But anyway, just give it a go. Try and read the words. Try and keep up with it and read the words in your own head as they're coming across the screen. They're about to go in 3, 2, 1, go. Now, probably what you'll find there is that you could make out some of the words, but you couldn't keep up with the speed at which the text is scrolling. What I'm now going to do is show another exactly the same words scrolling at exactly the same speed. They're taking up the same amount of real estate on the screen. They're scrolling at the same speed. All I've done is changed them to lowercase, and I've made the contrast a bit higher. Everything else is the same. Have a go at reading it this time. So what we find is that the improving the stroke weight, improving the contrast, and switching to lowercase usually makes the text dramatically faster to read. And yet everywhere I look in interfaces, in e-commerce images, time and time again, I find lightweight fonts at uppercase text in low contrast. And I'm like, why is it that people are trying to make this stuff hard to read when there are better options available? Now, moving on to truth number 4, to settle an age-old debate, I'm afraid size does matter. If I look at again, this is the results from the experimental data, but shown in a different way. This is with the words here varying from being very high contrast to very low contrast from bottom to top, varying from very large size to very small size, going from left to right. And this is, again, the glance readability surface, where this time the words that are easy to read at a glance are underneath the line, whereas the ones with the X's outside of the line are not very easy to see at a glance. Obviously, I don't know what size screen you're looking at this on, so this may or may not be completely representative, but it gives you a rough idea of what's going on. Now, the critical point here is that if you are familiar with any web accessibility content, like the web accessibility web content accessibility guidelines, known as WCAG, they will tell you that contrast is the most important thing to get right about text, and the size doesn't really matter. Unfortunately, that's complete and total rubbish. If I was going to pick one thing to focus on, it would in fact be the size. If the thing is too small that you can't see it, changing the degree of contrast doesn't make the blindness bit of difference. If we look at here, these words that are very, very small, whatever the contrast is, they're almost completely impossible to see. If your words are very large, then you can get away with quite low contrast and it's fine, but there is this trade-off surface that shows how size and contrast interact. This is the case for Open Sans Bold. If I change to show the results for Open Sans Regular, you can see that everything gets slightly harder to see, and this readability surface comes in a little bit further. If I switch to lightweight fonts, it comes in further still, and if I switch to uppercase fonts, then everything again gets more difficult. But what we find is that if an app designer who's aged under 50 is evaluating these words, their readability surface would be much, much better vision, essentially, than the average that you would expect to find in the population, or that from my experiment, which is this pink line, essentially. So the app designer who's aged under 50 looks at the text that's uppercase and says, I can see that, I think it's fine, but it's not appropriate for the wider population. And the tools that I'm going to demo at the end of this presentation will show you a better approach compared to just eyeballing it yourself. So moving on to inconvenient truth number 5, which is red on black is bad. Now, this is a particularly inconvenient truth for Coke Zero. It may or may not be an inconvenient truth depending on the apps that are out there, but it is certainly a big deal in some situations. This is about color vision deficiency. This graph shows, or tries to show, that you've got 3 cones in your eyes: blue sensitive, green sensitive, and red sensitive cones. This color is the whole spectrum of color. And then these graphs show you how each cone that you have picks up a different range of that full spectrum. Your brain integrates the answers from the blue cone, the green cone, and the red cone to give you the color that your brain perceives. It's commonly called red-green color blindness. Unfortunately, this description is monumentally misleading because it implies that the issue is between red and green. As long as you don't have red on top of green, you'll be fine. So it's unhelpfully called red-green color blindness. If I said it was impaired red sensitive cones, or even red blind color blindness, or something like that, it would give you a much, much more informative description of what happens, which is that red colors become a great deal darker. If we look at the prevalence, this proteinopia is the most common kind of color blindness that has the most impact. It's most common in white Caucasian males. It's something to do with that gene that's it's associated with white Caucasians. Women don't get it as much, and other races don't get it as much. Scandinavia has the highest proportion of that white Caucasian gene, so in that case it's 11% of men. In the UK, it's a rough average of, let's say, about 5% of men. On the left side here, you can see white text and black text on a variety of different colored backgrounds. On the other side, you can see exactly the same with simulated degree of impaired red sensitive cones. What you find when you do that is that by and large, a lot of the colors still hold up. But if I look specifically at the red background, then when I put the impaired red sensitive cones on, the red background gets a lot darker and the black text on the red background becomes almost impossible to see. This is showing in Photoshop that you can simulate color blindness for free. It's just in View, Proof Setup, and there you can turn it on or off to check that your assets or your artwork or your images or your text that you're designing or developing or evaluating will still remain visible, despite Protanopia is the particular one that needs to be checked the most. There's also a web link here to a color blindness simulator that's freely available online, and you can upload your own image to it and have a go at simulating all the various different conditions. I said it was an inconvenient truth. It's a massively inconvenient truth for Coke Zero. I think this is possibly one of the biggest rebrand cock-ups of all time, when they changed Coca-Cola, the full sugar variant, to white text on a red background. And they were like, what are we going to do to indicate the zero sugar? Zero often means that something is missing. So lots of brands go, oh, well, if something's missing, let's make the text become dark so that it's obvious that something's not there that was before. So they said, let's go with the black Coca-Cola logo on the back of a red background. And this has launched, and it's been Coca-Cola's. I think Coke Zero is probably now the flagship above and beyond the regular Coke is. If only that brand agency or anyone in the team at Coca-Cola had known about red blind color blindness or impaired red sensitive cones, and they would have gone, hey, you've just made your brand completely and totally invisible for 5% of the population. Why on earth did you do that, you muppets? Now, Coca-Cola have actually realized the error of their ways. I believe the Coca-Cola Coke Zero is being rebranded, and they have acknowledged the fact that the red on the black was a mistake. I don't know yet what their solution to it is. I suspect they'll change one of the colors, or they might outline it in white or something. But I do know that a rebrand is coming, and that will have been an end to 8 years of unnecessary pain for Coca-Cola, as they've accidentally realized they designed a color scheme that was completely invisible for some people. So truth number 6, contrast is not a ratio. There are literally countless of peoples online who will spout that contrast is a ratio, and you need to measure the contrast ratio, and it needs to be more than 4.5 to 1. Unfortunately, they're all completely and totally misguided. Contrast is not and has never been a ratio as perceived by human eyes. In terms of the importance of contrast, if you look at these words that I've put on the slide, probably if you stare at the bottom line long enough, you can read every single word. But if you try and read them fast, the stuff at low contrasts becomes much, much, much more difficult. So contrast doesn't make a massive amount of difference to threshold as to whether you can read the text if you stare at it for ages, but it makes a huge difference to how quickly you can read the text. So if contrast is important, how do we measure it? Well, according to the most authoritative source in the world regarding accessibility issues, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they will tell you contrast can be measured as a ratio, which is a ratio of the amount of light emanating from the foreground divided by the amount of light emanating from the background. If I look at a white text on a dark colored background like this, it will tell me that the contrast ratio is 4.1 to 1, and this is not enough. It will tell you that this text is not fit for purpose. Conversely, if I look at black text on a colored background, this measure will tell you that this text is absolutely brilliant. It's got a contrast ratio of 5.2 to 1, and it is fit for purpose. Now, if you look at these two side by side, the black text on the colored background has the bigger contrast ratio. I tend to find the white text on the colored background is the one that's easier to read. If you increase your viewing distance, so you go further and further away from the screen, you should find the effect becomes more and more pronounced. And by the time you're getting close to threshold, you can see the white text, but you can't see the black text anymore. So, but something's up here. How come this number is bigger? The 5.2 to 1 is bigger, and yet this one is smaller, and yet it appears better. The answer is because as a ratio terms, the black text has not a lot of light and the background has roughly sod all light either. So dividing some light by very little light gives me a very high ratio. This is a bit like saying I own 3 pence and you own 1 pence, therefore I own 3 times as much money as you, which is true, but by and large irrelevant in the world. Whereas conversely, if I own £150,000 and you own £100,000, I own £50,000 more than you, but only 1.5 times more than you. So when it's like the ratio isn't fit for purpose, it's the difference that matters, the absolute difference. Owning £50,000 more than somebody else is worthwhile. Owning 2 pence more than somebody else is barely worth bothering with. So the basic problem is that the measure uses a ratio when in fact, as human eyes perceive contrast, it ought to have been a difference. I love this quote. It says, simple contrast ratios are often used in photography to specify the difference between bright and dark parts of the picture. However, this definition is not useful for real-world contrast as perceived by human eyes. It's unfortunate then that the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, written in 2006, said that it was all about the contrast ratio, and it hasn't been updated since. But since January 22, there is a new kid on the block. It's called the Advanced Perceptual Contrast Algorithm, and it proposes new maths for calculating contrast, which is based on the difference rather than the ratio. So for every single instance of this text on colored background, the WCAG contrast ratio, which is used to assess the accessibility of every website in the world, would tell you that the black text is fine and the white text should be rejected. And if you had the choice of choosing white text or black text, you should choose the black text. Every single person that I've ever tested this with says that the opposite of all those things is in fact true. The white text is fit for purpose, the black text is not fit for purpose. And if you had the choice of choosing white text on a colored background or black text on a colored background, you should absolutely definitely take the white text, even though doing so means you will not be compliant with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The reason for this is because the guidelines are wrong. It's amazing the number of people that I sell this to, and they say, but the guidelines can't be wrong. They're implemented all over the world. They've been going for 20 years. They can't be wrong. And you're like, yes, all of that is true, and they are wrong. So if we use this contrast algorithm, which is the better one, it's not more lenient, it's not more stringent, it's just more accurate. What this means is that it allows a greater range of white text on colored backgrounds, but a smaller range of black text on colored backgrounds. So in conclusion then, or heading towards the conclusion, if all of these inconvenient truths are indeed true, the million-dollar question then is, how do I author text that's readable at a glance? Option 1 is to use guidance. This image is the very latest image that I've authored, which tries to give all of the guidance that anyone could ever need to know about making text easy to read at a glance in one single image. And I say you've got limits on the X height, you've got limits on the line spacing, you've got limits on the padding. If we're talking about continuous body paragraphs of text, the contrast difference by the APCA algorithm should be between 60 and 90. In terms of font weight, it should be between Open Sans Regular and Open Sans Bold. And you shouldn't do any of this sort of stuff, capitalizing, decorative, italicized, for continuous paragraphs of text. These styles and the compressed font style are all completely and totally not fit for purpose. If it's emphasizing a single word within a paragraph or looking at a single word or a short phrase, then the styling considerations aren't such a big deal because the text isn't taking up the whole page and I'm not trying to speed read it. I'm just trying to catch this single word at a glance. So the best guidance I can offer that's universal and general solution for any font at any size at any style is to say that any combinations of styling options can be used, but the outcome should be at least as legible as lowercase regular weight Arial text with an APCA contrast difference of 75 at the required size, which is given here. So it's like you can use any style you want, but make sure it's at least as easy to read as the benchmark. So this is the guidance, which will shortly be live on the Inclusive Design Toolkit website. It's currently in a draft form at the moment, so it's not there today, but it is my top list of my priorities to update the guidance that is there so that it matches this image here. The only trouble with this is this phrase about at least as legible as lowercase regular weight Arial text is not an automated solution. Anyone can do it by just putting the words on a wall and the two different styles, compare one against the other and see which one you can read most easily. But it doesn't tell you if I'm authoring an app or a website, what size should I use. So this is an interface. It's a work in progress. It's currently in Excel, but it is an attempt to make a dynamic general solution for any typeface, so for any font, for body paragraphs of text, or for individual words. How big does it actually need to be? I think I've got a few minutes, so I can try and demo this one live very quickly. He says, hopefully. Oh, there it is. So, for example, if I was to say I want to use Arial text and I want to use it in a website, then it would tell me if it's this color scheme, which has got 45 points of contrast difference, then I would need to have 7.4 CSSPX, which is like the international unit of web development. That's what you need to specify in your style sheet for that text to be fit for purpose. But if I increase the contrast to 75, you'll now see the text doesn't need to be quite as big. This is for individual words and short phrases. This is for body paragraphs of text down here. So it would say if I'm Arial regular, which is in fact my benchmark, then funnily enough, I need to be at least as big as the benchmark. So those two things work. But if I go to something like, if I go strange to Open Sans, for example, and I go to lightweight text, now it will say that this for body paragraphs of text, this font weight is too thin. It's saying it's not fit for purpose to use that font for lightweight. For paragraphs of text, if I wanted to use it for an individual word or short phrase, then the value, the difference would be here. If I was to change to Open Sans semi-bold, it says I can go smaller. If I were to change the contrast, it says I would need to go larger. This is, to my knowledge, the only dynamic, completely robust solution that's based on experimental data that can tell you how much difference it makes when you change the color and how much difference it makes when you change the font weight between one font and another. This is a general solution that I can apply for any font. It relies on measuring properties of that font by drawing X's and measuring dimensions and so on. I've written some VBA code that does that measurement basis, which gives this wonderful set of experiment calibration values. These are the calibration values that the interface uses to tell you what its answer is. So it's a general solution for any font, but it's pre-solved for this particular set of fonts. If there was a font in this list that somebody wanted to use, then the values could be calculated, but they haven't already been pre-calculated, if that makes any sense. The next step in my professional life is to get an interface like this live on a website so that anyone, anywhere who wants to design something can say, I'm doing a website, or if it was a printed thing like an instruction manual or physical labels on a medical device or any other handheld device, this would need to be, this again, the size that you would need to use. So this is available in an Excel spreadsheet, but Excel spreadsheets are an absolute nightmare for macro security. So although I could send you this Excel spreadsheet, you probably couldn't get it to run because your university or if you're working in a company won't let you, because the same macro magic that makes all of this interface work is the same macro magic that means I can harvest your email inbox and all your contacts in your address and email them to me. Now, I haven't made my Excel spreadsheet do that, but your IT security people don't know that. And so there's very good reason why organizations ban macro magic from running or make it extraordinarily difficult to run. So while I've got this as a proof of concept from an interface perspective to show the kind of information that's there, it's a work in progress to translate this into a website that anyone can use. Probably it will be under licensing conditions where the first couple of lookups is free. But if you want to do more, then you would pay for it. The idea would be that it would be free for students for short use projects and that kind of thing. But if you're part of a profit-making company that wants to do all of this stuff for your business, then you need to pay to be able to access this information. So all of that's a work in progress. It's also a work in progress to make it a PowerPoint plugin so that you can tell PowerPoint, this is what I'm designing. You can just hit the button and it'll make the text in PowerPoint as big as it needs to be. It's been developed, I believe, as an InDesign plugin. So that one is very, very close to launch now, so that you could be authoring something in the InDesign environment and say, this is the text I want to use, make it big enough so that it just works. I think after InDesign, we're going to do Illustrator, possibly Figma, and various others. So all of this is a work in progress. The one thing that is available at the moment is the general guidance that I wrote. It's not quite sense. It tells you it needs to be as legible as Arial, but doesn't tell you what the numbers are to achieve that. And this version that does tell you the numbers directly based on my experimental data is coming soon. And please contact me if you want to be kept updated as to when this sort of thing becomes live. Let's try there and seamlessly go back to my demo. It started from the end. That's a shame.
Sam?
Yeah.
Just to give you a heads up that there's 10 minutes till the end, and people may have questions. So I don't know how many slides you've got left, but just
okay, well, I have the best visual illusion of all time if you want to see it. But if you want me to skip past it, I can skip past the visual illusion of all time. So I might say that don't eyeball it is the answer in terms of how to check your text. You can check it using Rhino, which is a automated text in image checker. It's available under license. The link is here. It's, again, to my knowledge, the only fully automated solution for text that can say, yes, it's fit for purpose, or no, it isn't. There's an example here. You'll see the slides when they're sent around, which shows this thing working, where it's automatically pulled all the, this is the Google Health app, and it's automatically pulled all the text out of it, and the reds are fails and the greens are passes. It gives you, this is it as the table of results as to what's passed or what's not. There's also software that I do called Clarify, which applies Gaussian blurring to stuff, and it's fit for purpose if it survives the Gaussian blurring, and it's not fit for purpose if it's not. It's available in Photoshop. It's available in, oh, there's the PowerPoint version. There's the Photoshop version. Here's again the example of the Google Health app or plugin showing that the title part survives the Gaussian blurring. The dismiss is exceptionally sketchy, and the U-logged weight text is definitely too small. You can also do this stuff by impairment simulation glasses, which, funnily enough, I sell, and the link for here is available. So with that, I shall finish on this one, which is about the time to go for questions. So the question is, what's unusual about this wall? But I will leave the floor open for anybody who wants to guess. If you've seen this before, then please do. If you've seen this before, please keep quiet. If you haven't seen it before, please shout out or message in the chat window what is unusual about this wall, or ask me any question about anything else on the entirety of the presentation, and I'll finish there. Thank you.
I have no idea what's unusual about this wall, to be honest.
Nothing unusual at all.
Well, maybe you don't know the English word,
what's
but the
going
stuff
on
in
here?
between.
What's this?
I don't know. Somebody says a cigar.
Oh, somebody's got it. Anyone else got anything else that this is?
No idea. Finger? I don't know.
No. Most people look at this and say it's a stone. There's a stone in the wall. Some people say there's a snail in the wall. Most people look at this bit here and say there's a gap in the mortar. There's something wrong with the mortar in the wall.
Yeah.
The truth of what's actually going on is this wall has a hole in it here, and it has a cigar been pished through the hole. This is the body of the cigar here. The burnt bit of the cigar here is the bit that previously looked like a stone. This visual illusion has been very intentionally and very craftily constructed to show you an unconscious bit of your visual system that you never even knew you had. It's like software object detection, which takes the things that it thinks it can see and interprets those and sharpens them and manipulates them to become things that could realistically be in that context. So the software that you never knew you had made this look more like a stone than it really was. And it made this look more like a gap in the mortar than it really was, because your object detection software wasn't expecting to see a cigar poked through a small hole in the wall. The fantastic thing with this is once you've seen the cigar, you can never unsee it again. Because you know it's the cigar. Obviously, it's a cigar. I can only ever see the cigar now. I can't go back to a point when I first saw this where I thought it was a gap in the mortar. The most important bit of this exercise is to know that when you authored the interface, when you wrote the text, you already know what it is. When you evaluate the visibility of that text or glance readability, what you're saying is how easy to read at a glance is this text when I already know what the text is, and my object detection software is making that text easier, look easier for me than it really is. which hopefully is an obvious, ridiculous thing to do, but that's what everybody does. The most important.
I've got a question in the chat that I want to ask.
To
put in front of you, because I had a similar one. So somebody asked about health app design, and they did a PPIE group, so with patients, suggesting all kinds of things like being able to zoom in, and is there a speech options, like an audio option. So have you done anything in the area of health, and particularly in health apps? And then the second question within that would be, what do you think about making things customizable for people with different visual needs?
Oof, that's a topic I could literally talk on for the entire day. There is a group of people, let's say, that says we do an app and we should just design it any which way we want. And then we have a high contrast or accessible mode for the app where we make or increase all the contrast and all of that sort of stuff. And that approach is well-meaning, but I would suggest fundamentally and completely flawed. The reason is because it falls over time. Time and time again, even if it worked, the high contrast mode, when it was first authored, almost certainly 5 or 10 years later, it will have all fallen over because the bits that were changed to the high contrast mode won't be compatible and no one will have checked anymore. So I very actively promote things should be of adequate size and sufficient contrast in their default configuration. Now, there are some extra bits to that, like making sure text is zoomable and resizable, and all these sorts of things are good things to do. But making the text zoomable isn't an excuse to have the default text size being absolutely tiny. It should be appropriate as a default size, and it should also be zoomable and scrollable. Most of what I would do, most of the work that I have done has been focused on that statement of adequate size and sufficient contrast in the default configuration. Things like screen reader accessibility and various other semantic markup and alt tags and all of these sorts of things are all important things, but they're not the bit that I've specifically focused on. Like this stuff all exists and people are doing it, and there's web accessibility experts who can evaluate it. I focused my life on that adequate size and sufficient contrast in the default configuration. And that is appropriate, whether it's a health app, whether it's a nutrition information on a retailer website, whether it's a printed instructions for a medical device. My guidance is universal across all domains. Some of those domains are covered in the European Accessibility Act and some of them are not, but my guidance remains the same regardless of whether it's a thing that's in that scope or not.
I'm going to let Anjan, she raised her hand, and squeeze in a quick one. Anj, you're in. Can we hear you? I don't think we can.
Type the question into the chat and then I'll have a go at responding to it. So Chris said, what about individuals with vision impairment? You've got mild vision impairment, moderate vision impairment, severe vision impairment. There's different coping strategies that are appropriate for the different situations. At the very mild end of vision impairment, you want text that is zoomable so that you can make the text a little bit bigger. When you're at the more severe end of vision impairment, you're getting to a point where no amount of increasing the text size is going to be able to do the job. So that's really where you're talking about alternative channels. You're talking about using speech, using screen reader software, doing all these sorts of things. So it's like across the range of vision impairments. And
try.
To go.
No, it's not working.
Am I on?
Oh yeah, you are.
Sorry. My question. No, thanks. Really interesting talk. My question was, there's quite a few of us, I think, looking at the names on the chat, that do you work with different communities. So, for example, working with communities that might speak in Urdu, and I wondered if there's any accessibility guidelines around different languages. And it's not something that we work really hard on our app to think about this with regards to the English side of things, but it's now just made me think about the Urdu side of things too.
I mean, I haven't directly worked in that area. The European Accessibility Act, as it's written, says text should be perceivable and understandable, and it's got this wonderful phrase, in the likely conditions of use. Which is the kind of generic catch-all that covers all the sorts of things you're talking about, and a whole vast other amount of other things like ambient lighting and what phone size and so on. job with all of this sort of stuff is that it's a bit of a rabbit hole. As soon as you start going down providing multiple languages, how many languages do you support, and so on and so forth. It's an absolute nightmare from an interface perspective to make sure that all your buttons and things, I forget what it is, German words tend to be very long. So if you make your interface so that it works for all of the German words, then the English one is a lot shorter. So I can only say that it is a bit of a nightmare. It is really important. Being able to switch languages or things, it's a very difficult challenge, but it's an important one. I'm not sure I've got more to add than that.
Right, we're going to leave it at that. Thanks so much for a very engaging presentation, Sam. Really enjoyed that. We'll make the recording available on our website so people can have a look back at all the tools that you presented and the URLs, and they can get in touch with you if they have any questions, I think. And
yeah, please email me any feedback, stuff on the presentation that's amazing, stuff that was rubbish, tools that you'd like to hear more about. Obviously, if you'd like to buy any of my tools, I'd really like to hear from you. I am that shallow.
All right, well, people can get in touch with either with us or with you directly. But thanks very much. It was great.
Perfect. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, everybody.